I said all the names, Shabab.
No, for I section, I think.
I haven't received yet your list, Shabab. I
Okay.
requested the list, student list, but I haven't received it yet.
Okay.
Okay. طيب, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We continue what we started yesterday. We looked at some basic concept of database. Okay. And we said there are various types of database based on the type of data it deals with, or the data stored within the database. Okay. You can find some database that stores data under textual form and numeric form. You can find some databases that does have a storage of images, audio clips, video streams, and all multimedia data. You can find geographic information systems, data processing, warehouse, and real-time active database technology. And we looked at the database, the definition of the database. We said whenever you do have database, that means you are gathering related information, related data within your database. And those, or that data inside your database is based on known fact. That means when you specify, as we mentioned, when you specify a student database, when we say I do have student data, I do have courses data, these are known facts that does exist within that environment. And that environment, which is university environment, it is called, let's say, a mini world, because we are representing only part of the world, which is, let's say, that logical place, geographical place, which is the university campus, for instance. Okay, and that data represents something from the real world. University students, they really exist. We are not talking about fictions, okay, and we are putting imaginary data inside database. That data is really existing within the real world, okay, and it does have some meaning. It does have when we say student data, we know what is meant by student. Okay, we don't have to define it. It is already defined, and that database is defined. It has been created for specific purpose, for some specific, let's say, objective. And we said that there are many types of large commercial database, like Facebook, Amazon, Twitter, all those big companies. They are dealing with a huge number of data. Okay, and the main, or let's say the most important part of, let's say, the database, okay, which is the DBMS, which is the software or the software system that will help you or allow you to create the database itself. Okay, and that DBMS, or that database management system, we said it is a computerized system. Okay, it will help you to create database, to maintain the database. Okay, we can define it as a general purpose software system. Okay, that means it does have many options that you can do within your database. What you can do, you can, for instance, define database, you can construct, you can create a database, you can manipulate database, you can share your database, you can see later those definition related to the characteristic of the database. Okay, and that software, or that general purpose software system, which is the DBMS, will be used by many users, and it can be used by many applications. And that DBMS, all those tasks that can be done by DBMS, they are not done by only one device or one program. It is a collection of programs. Okay, we said that DBMS has many small programs inside it, and those programs, each program will have, or has specific purpose, has specific task to be done within the DBMS. And when we say we define a database, okay, what is meant by defining a database, that means we need to define the data type. What is data type, guys?
If it's a string or name.
Boolean.
Yes, it is the type of data, because when we put data inside database, we need to specify what type of data. For instance, when you go, when you open, let's say, a form, let's say you have been asked to open a form within a website, okay, and you have been requested to input your mobile phone. When you go to put your mobile phone, now you are not going to put anything inside that field, that text box. You have to put specific, let's say, numbers, and not all the numbers, not let's say a lengthy number. That input box will allow you only, for instance, to enter, let's say, 8 numbers only. Okay, that means those or that data that is stored inside the database need to be specified by its data type. You need to specify whether it is integer or whether it is a string or a float point or a Boolean, whatever the data type, it needs to be specified. This is what we mean by it is part of defining database. That means you specify the data type, you specify the structures. Structures, that means when we say I do have a database, okay, when you do have a database, I need to specify what type of, let's say, structure I do have. Okay, just let me try to see if we can open a whiteboard here. Can you see the jump board, ya Shabab? Does it appear on your screen?
Yes.
Okay.
We cannot see the screen.
No, we
No, we can't.
You cannot
see,
see,
we can see them. You mean the link? Because they sent a link, a jam file.
just let me open it from other place. Okay, when we said you have to you specify the structure. Okay, we specify the structure of the database. That means when you do have a database, let's say this is my database. Okay, let's say this is my database, and inside the database you will find many different types of records, or let's say information. Okay, for instance, I will find student informations. I can find also courses. Okay, in other place I can find, for instance, let's say instructors. Okay, these are the type of the structure. This is what I mean by structure. Structure, that means how my database is structured. What are the different components that make my database? I cannot say, let's say I do have the database, and even inside those structure, they do have their own, let's say, structure. Okay, that means I will have, for instance, I can have here I can have a name of the student, I can have mobile phone, I can have his address, I can have his GPA, for instance, or student ID. Okay, these are the structure. These are the different types of, let's say, inside each we do have that big structure, which is my table. I have one table that represents student information. I have another table that will represent courses, another table that will represent instructors, and even, as I mentioned, each structure or each component is also by itself a structure. It is made of different types of fields. Okay, and this is what we mean by specifying the structure of the database. Okay, when we mean by specifying the structure of the database, that means we are specifying what are the different types of components that make our database. Okay, another, let's say, part of defining a database is to specify constraint of the data to be stored. Does anyone has this idea, Shabab? Constraint, what are the constraints?
So, for
Yeah,
example,
for example,
the
the
number
length.
cannot exceed 100, maybe.
Yes, barakallah. Constraints which are restrictions. Okay, when we specify mobile phone, student mobile phone, we specify some constraint. We say that that mobile phone should be only formed of numbers and should not exceed 8. It is exactly 8 numbers. Okay, we can have, for instance, another constraint that student cannot register, for instance, for more than 20 hours per semester. Okay, Shabab? So all this can be considered as a constraint. That means when we specify a database, when we say define a database, that means you need to specify the data type, the structures, and if there are any constraint inside your database, you specify those constraints.
I have
Okay?
a question.
Yes?
Can we specify the type of the data structure? So, for example, is it like maybe a hash table or a tree, maybe like search tree?
No,
Or is
for
it
the relation,
too low level for databases?
for the relational database we are covering, it does accept only tables. Okay, we call them as an entity tables.
Okay.
Okay. Now we do have another thing which is related to the database, which is known as a metadata. Metadata is the definition or description information. We mean by description information, which is like a catalog. Okay, when you do have, because when we say that, let me show you here. This is an example of a metadata. Metadata is the data about the data, information about the data. Because when we talk about, let's say, when we talk about the database, okay, let me show. When we talk about the database, for instance, okay.
Dr. Kansir. Oh, okay.
Okay, when we talk about the database, you do have the structures. Let's say we talk about, for instance, the data itself. Let's say this is a student information. Okay, and I do have, for instance, the name of student, for example. Okay, I can have his, for instance, ID 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, for instance. Okay, and I have here another constraint. Okay, for instance, PSU. This is the data. Okay, that will be stored inside your database, and along with the data itself, you have another information. Okay, that will be also stored within the database, which is the metadata. Metadata, that means for each field inside your database, you have that information specified for each one. Okay, for instance, I will say Omar is a string. Okay, a string, let's say between 1 and let's say 12 characters. Okay, this is the information. It's like you are defining data type. For Omar, it should be a string. For instance, for the student ID, it is, for instance, I will specify it as integer. Okay, and it should be exactly, for instance, 8 numbers. Okay, exactly 8 numbers. You can see here, we do have one thing here. This is the data, المعلومات نفسها, the information itself. Okay, then we do have metadata, which is the information about the data, معلومات على الداتا نفسها. Okay, شباب, and this is what you will find inside the database anytime. For inside that DBMS we have been we mentioned previously, you always have the data, one place that will hold the data and another place that will hold the metadata. Okay, I will call this one, this is the data. Okay, this is my data itself, and this is metadata, which is information about the data itself. Clear يا شباب?
Yes. I have a question.
Yes.
So some companies that collect user data claim that they don't collect like personal data, but they collect metadata. So how is metadata more private than like normal data?
Like a location, your location, for instance. Your location should be private. Okay, the geolocation of your, when you specify, for instance, when you have your mobile and you install an application, and it will ask you, for instance, whether you allow, okay, to use your, let's say, location. And this is a private data. It is considered as a private data. You don't want to be localized. Okay, this is one of the information that that is a private data, which is metadata, which is your location.
I mean, what do they mean when they say they collect only metadata?
The data about the data itself, the metadata is the information about your data. For instance, how many, let's say, collect, for instance, how many contacts you do have within your contact list. This is metadata.
So without having like the specific contact names, just the number.
Yes, not the data itself.
Okay.
But the information about the general, about the data itself. For instance, you can say, for instance, I know that you are 19 years old, but I don't have exactly your date of birth. It's like something like that. Okay.
Yes.
Now the metadata, let's say we talk about the metadata. Now each time, okay, whenever, for instance, you are requested, let's say, to update, let's say, for instance, I want to update this number by another number. Each time you input a new information, you are updating any field within your database, before that DBMS will accept your new data, it has to verify whether it complies with the metadata. If it is okay, it will accept your new number. For instance, I have entered here, I want to update it into ABCD, for instance. Before that ABCD will be accepted by the DBMS, the system that will that is used to maintain and update your database, it will verify whether this ABCD, okay, complies with the requirement here, with the constraint. The constraint here says it should be an integer of 8 numbers. And it finds that this is not an integer, so it will not be accepted, that the BMS will not accept your new data. That means each time you try, this is the idea about, let's say, the benefit of having the metadata within your database. It will verify whether any update is complying to the requirement, to the constraint that have been specified when you created your database or not. Okay? And this is
this metadata is for the whole table, and for example, integer 8 is for this for the whole row.
For the now, say it again.
The integer 8, for example, in numbers.
Yes.
Is it for the whole row or is it for only one cell?
No, it is for everything, because when you say you do have data of here, this is just the data. But when I created my database, okay, when I created the database, okay, I said that this is the field of my table, student table. Here I do have name. This is the field name. This is the field, let's say, student ID. Okay, and this is the field, for instance, affiliation. Okay, and I specify that name, okay, has this metadata or this requirement. This is as general. Okay, and this is the table, and this is your table. Okay, student table. This we call, let's call it student table definition. We are defining
this third table is also meta table or not?
نعم.
This third table, name and set ID, is also meta table or definition?
This is the definition of the table. Then when I go to name, and when I specify name is a string 112, student ID is integer number, this is the metadata. Okay? Now the data is the data, it's the information. Okay? And whatever you specify here in the name as requirement or as restrictions, okay, it will apply to all students. Anyone that has been registered inside this table should have the same metadata. That means when I said this row should be, or this field is an integer 8 numbers, this will be applied to any data that is stored in this table. That means all the students that are included in this table will have to comply, their data will be complied or will comply to what I have specified in when I define my data. When I define the structure, this is structure. And when I define this structure, this will be applied to all students. At the end, what you will have, Shabab, at the end, you will have something like that. Okay? That, for instance, this is student table. Okay, this is student table. I have the information about student 1, Omar. I have a student about Ali, for instance. Okay, Muhammad, and so on. This is the whole, this is the student table. Okay, and my student table has this record. We call them as a record, or let's say information. We're going to see later how we can define that. These are, and you can find many table. Each information is part of the student table. Student table as a general, it's like a container, like a bag, and inside your bag you have many mobile phones, and each mobile phone has some specific characteristic. The same thing, okay? I do have a table, which is the container. This is my container, like a bag. Inside it, I have this mobile phone, or this information about student number 1, student 2, student 3, and so on. And when I define that student table, okay, I defined it that the student table should be made up of name, student ID, affiliation. And I have to verify name, student ID, affiliation, name, student ID, affiliation, and so on. Clear, guys?
Yes, clear.
Where is the meta
Yes.
the meta table well saved? Also
Metadata.
Metadata, yes.
Yes?
It will save also in this container.
No. The container, that container contains the information, the data. Okay, let me see. I will show you later. I don't have. Yes, here it is. Okay, here, this is the way how the DBMS works. Okay, what you have here, you have the stored database definition, the metadata, and you do have the stored database, the data itself. Okay,
so we have
this is the DBMS. This is, let's say, the system, the whole system. Okay, and when we define, each time you define your database, okay, when you specify the structure, when you specify the data type with the constraint, those data type and constraint will be stored in this place. And the data, it will be stored in another place. And each time, as I mentioned, each time you need to input new data here, before the DBMS, the system will accept your data. Okay, what your system will do, will verify, will consult, will look at the metadata and look at the student name, whether what you have entered, what you have inputted, complies what it has been defined in the metadata or not. Is it string? Yes. Is there any constraint about the length? Yes. Verify it. If there is no constraint, I will accept it. So it will return yes to the DBMS. Then the DBMS will update the stored database with the new data, or with the new updated data. Okay, Shabab? So this is the metadata, the information about the data. Data is one thing, and metadata is the information about your data. When I said Omar 123 PSU, this is the data. When I go to Omar, that field is string, 12 characters. This is the metadata. This is the information that you will find. Okay, like here, we are defining employee ID, for instance. Okay, for the employee ID, This is an employee table that does have all those fields. One of the fields, for instance, it is an employee ID. If I go to the employee ID, I will see that the field size is a long integer. This is metadata, information, the restriction, the data type you are specifying. We are not specifying what is the employee ID, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, for instance. It is not here because this is metadata. This is not the data. Clear, Shabab? And this is what we call by a catalog or dictionary. It's like a catalog. We concept the catalog. Each time the DBMS will go back to the catalog or dictionary and verify whether the data you have inputted complies with the requirement or not. Yes?
Yes, Doctor. For the metadata, is it if I want to look for a specific data, so the metadata help to retrieve the data fast? Is that
no, it doesn't have anything to do with the quick response of your database. It has to do to verify whether that data is following the requirement or the restrictions or not. This is the metadata. Okay, let's say, for instance, you are you recruited, okay, administrator in a company, okay, and you have been given a task to work with your database, with an existing database. Okay, how do you know what are the different types of characteristics?
by the metadata?
Or for your database, you find information about employees, their name, their mobile phone, their whatever, the information stored in that database. Now you have been asked to input a new employee's data inside that database. Okay, how do you verify whether what you are going to input inside the database is complying to the requirement to Lala? What you look at the metadata. You look at the name, for instance, the name of the employee, how that name was defined at the beginning. Okay, if it says it is string, that means I should enter a string. Employee ID, how do you know that the employee ID is only numbers or it is a mixture of numbers and characters? You look at the metadata and see the definition. What is the data type of that employee ID? Is there any constraint? If yes, all that type of information will be stored in this catalog or the metadata. Clear, Shabab?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we said that one part of the DBMS, what you can do with the DBMS, okay, it will allow you to do many things. One, let's say, among those type of what you will do with the DBMS, you will manipulate the database. When we say you are manipulating database, that means you are querying database. You are looking at searching within your database. You are updating the database. This is what we mean by manipulating. When you generate reports, for instance, I want to have a report of all students who have GPA greater than 4. Okay, I will search within the database, and that I will print all the result. That means what I am doing now, I am manipulating the database. That means querying, updating, generating reports is part of manipulating the database. Another task that we can do with database is sharing a database. That means you will allow multiple users, programs, to access the same database at the same time. Okay, when you look at, for instance, when you access your record, your account within your database, within PSU database, you are not the only student who is accessing right now that database. You might find many students accessing the same database at the same time. We say that database is shared by many users. Okay, you have application program. There are some programs that are used to send some query to the DBMS. Okay, you are not interacting directly with the DBMS. You are interacting with the DBMS via using some application program. Let's say, for instance, you have a website. Okay, you open your browser and you send a query. You Google, for instance, you put your keyword, okay, search keyword, and you click send or search, that means you are using your browser to query the DBMS. Okay, that means we are using another application program or web application. Okay, when we said we are querying the database, that means we are retrieving data. We are looking, we are searching within the database, and we are extracting and fetching some information. Okay, Shabab? So we can stop here. We'll continue, inshallah.